The morning sun crept slowly over the horizon, spilling light across the endless stretch of golden grass and sage. Colt Turner rode through the stillness, the sound of his horse's hooves steady and familiar beneath him. It was the kind of quiet that only came before a storm, a hush that made the whole desert seem to be holding its breath. He'd ridden this route 100 times, checking the fence lines, scanning for strays, keeping his distance from trouble. But today felt different, though he couldn't say why. Maybe it was the smell of rain hiding behind the heat, or the way the wind carried a strange weight to it. Something in his gut told him the land was about to give up one of its secrets. He spotted the vultures first, circling low near the rocky edge of the ravine. He slowed Scout to a trot, squinting against the glare. Vultures didn't gather unless death was close. Colt drew in a deep breath and nudged his horse forward, hand resting easy on the rifle at his saddle. As he got closer, he saw it, blood. Dark, half-dried, splashed across a stone. Then more of it, smeared along the dirt as if someone had tried to crawl away. His pulse picked up. He dismounted and crouched, fingers brushing the blood. It wasn't more than a day old. Whatever happened, it hadn't been long ago. He followed the trail down the slope, moving careful between the rocks. Scout stayed behind, ears flicking nervously. The air grew still, heavy, almost like the earth itself was watching. Then Colt saw her. At first, he thought it was just a pile of torn buckskin caught under a fallen branch. But then he saw the small rise of a chest, the shimmer of dark hair, and the broken shaft of an arrow buried deep in her shoulder. She was young, barely more than a girl, and she wasn't dead yet. Colt froze where he stood. He'd seen Apache women before, mostly from a distance, and always under tense circumstances. He knew enough to understand that this was bad ground to be standing on. Helping her could mean trouble. Not helping her, he couldn't make himself think about that. He knelt slowly beside her, careful not to startle her if she woke. Her face was smeared with dirt and blood, but beneath it, her skin was pale, her lips dry, cracked from thirst. He reached out to check for breath, and her eyes snapped open. They were dark, sharp, full of terror. She tried to move, a strangled cry escaping her lips. "No," she gasped, her voice trembling, weak as a dying flame. "Please, don't pull it." Colt's hand froze where it was, halfway to the arrow. "Easy," he said quietly, his voice low, steady. "You're hurt bad. I ain't gonna do nothing stupid." Her hand moved, trembling, toward the wound. "If you pull it," she whispered, "I die." He frowned, glancing at the arrow more closely. The shaft had snapped near the skin, and the tip glistened faintly with something oily, dark. His stomach turned. Poison. Whoever shot her hadn't wanted to kill her clean, they'd wanted her to suffer. "Who did this?" he asked, though he already suspected. She turned her face away, tears cutting faint lines through the dust on her cheeks. "White men," she breathed. "Hunting." Colt's jaw tightened. He'd heard rumors, bounty riders going after Apaches for pay, taking scalps to collect government coin. He hadn't wanted to believe it, but seeing this girl, broken and left for dead, it made something inside him twist hard. He tore off a strip of cloth from his shirt and wrapped it gently around the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. "You'll bleed out if I don't get it out," he muttered. She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Don't pull," she said again, panic flashing in her eyes. "Please, there is medicine in my pouch." He looked around and saw a small leather pouch half hidden under the dust beside her. When he opened it, the scent hit him, sharp, earthy, bitter. Inside were bundles of dried herbs and a small gourd sealed with wax. "This it?" She nodded weakly. "Pour around, not in." He did as she said, dribbling the liquid around the wound. The fluid hissed when it met the poisoned skin, a faint puff of steam rising. She clenched her teeth, biting back a cry, her fingers digging into the dirt. Colt's heart hammered, but he kept steady, watching as the black sheen faded slightly. "What's your name?" he asked when she slumped back, exhausted. Her eyes fluttered, half closing. "Ayana." He repeated it softly under his breath. "Ayana. All right, Ayana. You're gonna be fine. I'll get you to my place." He wrapped her carefully in his coat, lifting her as if she were made of glass. She cried out, a small sound that tore through him, but he held her close, whispering steady words. Scout shifted uneasily as Colt mounted with her in his arms, but the horse obeyed, knowing his rider's tone meant no room for question. They rode hard through the brush, the wind stinging Colt's eyes, dust rising behind them like smoke. He didn't dare look back. If someone had done this to her, they could still be near. Every mile felt longer than the last, each jolt of the horse's stride making Iona groan faintly against his chest. By the time he reached the cabin, her skin was burning hot with fever. He carried her inside, laying her gently on his bed. The place was small, rough-hewn logs, a stone hearth, shelves stacked with jars and bandages, but it was home. He lit the fire, fetched water, and started working on her wound again. The arrow was still in too deep to remove safely, and he didn't trust his hands enough to risk it. He cleaned around it as best he could, using the herbs she carried, soaking her fevered skin with cool water. Through the long hours of the night, he stayed by her side, changing bandages, whispering comfort, watching as her body fought to stay alive. Near dawn, her fever broke. She stirred, eyes opening slowly, and for a moment she didn't seem to know where she was. Then she saw him sitting nearby, the firelight flickering across his tired face. She blinked, her voice rasping. "Why help me?" Colt didn't look at her right away. He tossed a log into the fire, watching the sparks leap. "Didn't seem right, leaving you out there," he said quietly. "No one deserves that." She studied him, eyes wary, still caught between gratitude and fear. "They will come," she said softly. "The men who did this. They don't stop." Colt's eyes hardened. "Then they'll find me waitin'," he said, the words low, steady as stone. For a long moment, silence filled the small cabin. Outside, the coyotes called in the distance, the wind pressing against the walls. Inside, something else took root, something quiet and fragile, like trust, though neither of them dared name it. As the first light of morning seeped through the cracks, Colt looked at her again. She was already fading back to sleep, her lips moving faintly in a language he didn't understand. He knew he was in deep trouble now. Harboring an Apache girl would get him shot if anyone found out, but he also knew he couldn't undo what he'd done. He'd made a choice, and as he sat there, watching over her, Colt realized this girl, this stranger from another world, might just change everything he thought he knew about mercy, about courage, and about himself. The sun was barely up when Colt Turner rose from his cot, the faint pink light spilling through the cracks in the wooden shutters. The air was cool, but the wind carried the promise of heat later, the kind that baked the earth until it cracked. He rolled his shoulders, still stiff from a night of uneasy sleep, and glanced toward the bed. Iona lay there, her dark hair spread over the blanket, breathing soft and even. Her fever had eased, though she was far from healed. The arrow wound still burned angry and red despite the herbs. Colt had cleaned it twice through the night, whispering soft words even though she couldn't hear him. He didn't know why he cared as much as he did, but leaving her to die had never been an option. He moved quietly, stepping outside to split some kindling. The first few swings of his axe broke the silence of the plains, echoing off the hills. Scout grazed nearby, flicking his tail, calm as ever. For a few minutes, everything felt almost normal again. But then Colt saw it, thin lines of dust curling up from the eastern road. He stopped mid-swing. Riders. 2 of them. A familiar cold prickle crawled up his spine. Folks didn't ride this far out unless they had business, and business out here was never good. He set the axe down, wiped his hands on his shirt, and squinted into the glare. The riders were still far, but closing fast. One wore a black hat that caught the light. Colt's stomach tightened. He'd seen men like that before, bounty hunters. He turned quickly, stepping back inside. Iona was awake now, propped weakly on one elbow, watching him with alert, wary eyes. "Riders," he said low. "Comin' from the east. You recognize that side of the valley?" She nodded faintly, tension flickering through her face. "Yes, the men who hunt me come from there." Colt cursed under his breath. "Then we ain't got much time. You can stand." She tried, pushing herself upright, but the movement sent pain shooting through her side. Her face went pale. "I will try." "No, don't strain it," he said quickly, moving to help her. He guided her to the small corner behind the curtain that separated his sleeping area. "Stay quiet. Don't make a sound, you hear? I'll handle it." Her hand caught his arm, gripping it weakly. "They kill," she whispered. "They do not ask." He looked down at her, the fear in her eyes clear as daylight. "Well," he said softly, "they'll find I don't ask neither." He grabbed his rifle, checked the chamber, and stepped onto the porch as the riders approached. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of dust and horses. The first man, a tall one with a scar down his cheek, reined in his horse a few paces away. The other, younger and thinner, shifted uneasily in his saddle, eyes darting around like a nervous jackrabbit. "Mornin'," Colt called, keeping his tone easy. "Mornin'," the scarred one replied, tipping his hat. "You Turner." "Depends who's askin'." The man smiled thinly. "Name's Briggs. My partner here's Lyle. We're lookin' for someone, an Apache woman. Heard she's wounded, might have passed this way." Colt let his gaze drift toward the horizon, pretending to think. "Can't say I've seen anybody but cattle and the occasional coyote." Briggs leaned forward on his saddle horn. "That's so. Heard she killed 2 ranch hands near Verde Creek. Shot one with a poison arrow. Word is she's hidden somewhere north of here." "Don't mean she's anywhere near my land," Colt replied, his tone cool. Briggs swung down from his horse. "Mind if we take a look around?" Colt's jaw flexed. He took one step forward, his boots grinding in the dirt. "I mind plenty," he said. "Ain't nothin' here but tools, firewood, and a man tryin' to be left alone." Lyle glanced nervously toward the cabin. "We don't want no trouble, mister. We just got orders." Briggs gave a lazy grin, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, well, sometimes trouble finds us anyhow. You sure you ain't harborin' anyone? Could fetch you a nice reward if you hand her over." Colt's stomach twisted. Reward. He knew how much that word could make men cruel. "Ain't got anyone to hand over," he said evenly. Briggs stepped closer. "You're sweatin'," he said quietly. "That means somethin', cowboy." Colt raised his rifle, the motion smooth as breath. "Means I've had about enough talk." The air tightened. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. Briggs' smirk faltered for the first time. He studied Colt's eyes and must have seen something there that made him think twice. "You're making a mistake," Briggs said finally, backing away slow. "That girl, she ain't just a runaway. She's cursed. Her people killed settlers. She's death walkin', Turner." "Then she'll be walkin' far from you," Colt said quietly. Briggs stared a moment longer, then swung up onto his horse. "You best pray we don't find out you lied to us." They rode off slow, the sound of hooves fading down the trail until the dust settled. Colt waited a long time before lowering his rifle. His pulse still pounded hard in his throat. Inside, Ayanna was trembling when he returned. "They're gone?" she asked. "For now," he said, setting the rifle aside. "But they'll be back. They ain't the type to give up easy." Her hands clutched the blanket tightly, knuckles white. "You risked your life," she said softly. "Why?" He sat by the fire, staring into the flames. "'Cause I don't take kindly to men huntin' women like game. Ain't right." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "If they find you with me, they will kill you." Colt gave a small, tired smile. "Then they'll have to earn it." She turned her face toward the fire, her voice a whisper. "In my tongue, there is a word, Iowaninishni. It means, I am grateful." He didn't answer right away, just stared at the fire crackling between them. Outside, thunder rumbled far off, low and deep. "You rest," he said finally. "Tomorrow, we figure out what comes next." The night stretched long. Rain began to fall softly against the roof, and somewhere in the dark, a coyote cried. Colt couldn't sleep. He sat near the window, watching the rain slide down the glass, thinking of Briggs' words, cursed. Maybe she was, or maybe it was the world that was cursed, filled with men too blind to see the difference between justice and cruelty. By dawn, he'd made up his mind. He saddled Scout, packed some food, and filled a canteen. Ayanna tried to sit up when she saw him preparing. "You leave me?" she asked, fear flickering across her face. "Not leavin'," he said, cinching the saddle strap. "We're leavin'." Her eyes widened. "You would come into Apache land. They will not welcome you." "Don't matter," Colt said. "You said your people think you're dead. Seems to me that's something worth setting straight." She hesitated, torn between disbelief and a fragile hope. "They will not trust you." "Then I'll earn it," he said simply. "But you ain't dying here on account of their hate or someone else's greed." He helped her onto the horse, careful of her wound. She winced but didn't protest. When he swung up behind her, his arms steadying her, the dawn light broke over the hills, washing the land in gold. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythm of hooves and the whisper of the wind. Ayanna turned her head slightly, her voice soft. "You are strange, Colt Turner. Reckon I've been called worse." She smiled faintly, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "You listen when I say don't pull it," she said. "Most white men do not listen." He looked out over the open land ahead. "Guess that's where most white men go wrong." And as the rising sun spread light across the desert, Colt felt something stirring deep inside him, something like purpose, something like redemption. For the first time in years, He wasn't just riding fence lines or fixing what was broken. He was riding towards something that mattered. And he had no intention of turning back.